Because the fruit is processed unwashed, cleanliness matters. Linen sacks and a massive tarpaulin are spread beneath the trees, right over dirt and cow dung to catch the falling fruit before it hits the ground. If you want to know what the finished product looks like and tastes like, stick around until the end. For the moment though, let's move on and continue harvesting fruit like they did hundreds of years ago. To bring the harvest down, they use a simple tool, a 4 to 5 meter wooden pole with an iron hook on the end. The hook grabs the branches shake, the fruit falls. Harvest season is relentless. While apples and pears rain down here, corn is being cut in the neighboring field. Every piece of fruit is picked up by hand and stacked into baskets. These are traditional Walloon plum baskets, about 35 centimeters high, holding roughly 30 liters each. On this farm, the kraut recipe is precise. 2/3 pears, 1/3 apples, plus plums. The plums are the kraut maker's signature, added for depth and complexity. The exact blend shifts with the harvest, but one rule never changes. Pears always dominate. From the 19th century to well into modern times, kraut was made almost exclusively in small farming and craft operations like this one. Families produced enough for themselves and sold the excess. Over the decades, kraut makers mechanized where they could without abandoning tradition. That evolution was driven by competition. Kraut factories emerged, many of them growing directly out of old farm presses. But on the Marcus farm, the fruit still comes straight from the orchard to the yard. No middlemen, no detours. The farm has a separate utility building dedicated entirely to kraut cooking. The baskets are unloaded and carried into the barn. A massive kettle sits on top, filled with fruit that's been gently pre-cooked. Fresh fruit, still unwashed, is added directly into the kettle. Good kraut depends on one critical balance. The fruit must soften but never collapse into mush. The cooking kettle is a giant, round brass with 2 heavy handles. It measures 1.2 meters across and nearly 80 centimeters high. The kettle can hold 1,200 weight of fruit, nearly a full cubic meter. Once it's filled to the rim, the fruit is sealed in with layers of linen sacks. The fabric traps heat, helping the fruit soften evenly. The fire underneath never stops. Wood has to be fed in constantly. From start to finish, the process burns through 1.5 to 2 cubic meters of wood. Here, it's mostly waste wood. Nothing goes to waste. Depending on the load and the strength of the fire, soft cooking takes 5 to 6 hours. The kraut maker checks the kettle again and again. At the beginning, 70 liters of water are poured over the fruit to prevent scorching and speed the softening. If needed, fruit juice is added as well. That juice comes from an earlier pressing. Once the fruit is fully softened, it stays in the kettle overnight on a low fire. Hot fruit pulp presses more easily than cold. Above the furnace, a roof hatch stands open, letting steam roll out of the building. By morning, the softened fruit and its released juice are transferred into the press. The tarps that covered the kettle are pulled away and hung over a pole to drip dry. Every 2 buckets of fruit pulp, a cloth is laid into the tub. It filters the juice and stabilizes the press as pressure builds. Beneath the outlet, an 80-liter kettle slowly fills with pure fruit juice. As soon as the kettle fills, the juice is poured into a large barrel to keep the outlet clear. By now, the fruit has collapsed into a dense, steaming mass. It's spread evenly inside the press and covered again with linen sacks. To empty the last of the kettle, the entire vessel is lifted off the furnace with a crane. The crane is permanently mounted to the barn wall. A few ladles of juice loosen what's stuck to the bottom and sides. Then the kettle is scrubbed with water and a brush thoroughly. Any leftover fruit could burn later and ruin the kraut. Once cleaned, the juice goes back into the kettle. It passes through a rectangular copper sieve lined with a coarse kitchen cloth. The cloth traps fine particles and has to be rinsed repeatedly in cold water as it clogs. The furnace itself is built directly into the barn floor, a permanent installation meant to burn for days at a time. The fire pit measures 1.20 meters across. A stone staircase leads down to the firing door. Waste wood fuels the fire. Hawthorn, beech, and hazelnut, Leftovers from hedge trimming serve as kindling. In the past, railway briquettes were used instead. The kettle is lifted back onto the furnace by crane, and the kraut maker seals the gap between the kettle and the fire pit with sand. That seal is crucial. Without it, the furnace won't draw properly. As the fruit mass settles in the press, 3 thick wooden press boards are laid on top. Each board is 3 to 4 centimeters thick, cut precisely to fill the tub's 80-centimeter diameter. No gaps, no wasted pressure. Under the sheer weight of the press boards, fruit juice begins to flow again. Squared timbers are stacked evenly on top, layer by layer. Once the height is right, the spindle is screwed down and real pressure begins. Pressing lasts 2 to 3 hours. Every 15 minutes, the pressure is increased. By the end, 500 kilograms of fruit, about 1,100 pounds, have been reduced to 300 liters of juice, roughly 80 gallons. Wood is added constantly to keep the heat steady. Boiling the juice down into kraut takes another 7 to 8 hours. During that time, 300 liters of juice, around 80 gallons, shrink to just 60 to 70 kilograms of kraut, or roughly 130 to 155 pounds. As the hours pass, the spindle is tightened again and again. The spindle is backed off. One by one, the heavy press boards are lifted out. The press tub, resting loosely on a zinc-lined tray, is freed and tipped backward. What's left between the linen sacks is the press residue known as ketcher. It was valued not just for its taste, but for its price. Nothing is wasted, the residue is fed to cattle. In the 19th century, kraut was a staple food, especially for the poorest families. Back at the furnace, the juice continues to reduce. Not only must the added water evaporate, but the natural liquid in the fruit itself. After roughly 8 hours, it's time for the gel test. A small amount of kraut is placed into a test dish and cooled in a bucket of cold water. After a few minutes, the consistency is checked. Knowing when it's right takes years of experience. Once the texture is perfect, everything moves fast. The kraut is transferred into traditional reieren or langerwehe baren. These salt-glazed stoneware jars are rust brown and hold about 35 liters, roughly 9 gallons or about 70 pounds of kraut each. Then the kraut is ladled out, scoop by scoop, into the jars. A brass drip guard is fitted over the kettle's rim to catch every last drop. Nothing is wasted. Kraut cooking is hard work. Lifting, pressing, stirring, filling, it demands time and strength. The entire process takes 2 full days, and it's done alone. For that reason, kraut cooking, especially as a part-time farm operation, was traditionally men's work. The stirring tool is a simple wooden scraper shaped to clean the kettle's walls and bottom as the kraut cools. The fruit kraut made here contains no added sugar. Today, commercial Rhenish apple kraut is allowed to contain up to 25% sugar. Yet kraut, whether made from beets or fruit, has found its way back. After nearly disappearing in the decades following the Second World War, it's once again being valued for what it has always been: simple, durable, and deeply tied to the land. But if you want to see a feat of craftsmanship even more incredible than this, be sure to check out this next video right here. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel right now.